Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Right now we're in a bit of a weird phase in War Within where we are just basically waiting for some brand new content from the patch 11.2.5, potentially a midnight alpha, as well as the release of the early housing preview. However, we haven't really had a lot of information from Blizz themselves, giving us like any hints as to when any of this future content will be arriving, besides 11.2.5, which actually got a proper release date. But Midnight Alpha, ever since its reveal, got a lot of people excited regarding some of the future content updates. The housing is a feature that many players have been waiting for a very long time, but it looks like potentially we might be getting both of these very soon. While we don't have any official release dates by Blizz themselves announced whatsoever, there is a lot of connecting dots that players are trying to pull together based on the information we have so far that actually may be giving us an idea when Midnight might be releasing, including Legion Remix and how mysterious NPC revealed that housing is coming out super soon, but also based on the steadiness of content updates for War Within, maybe suggesting that Midnight is actually right around the corner. So I wanted to put together all of these different theories together to take the best guess as to when all of this upcoming content may be arriving going forward. But with that, as always, if you guys want to see more upcoming content updates for War Within like Legion Remix and patch 11.2.5 and early housing preview and Midnight Alpha, whenever that drops, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, before we go to don our tinfoil hats to start making wild guesses as to when the content will be arriving, we actually do have quite a lot of content that's coming out really soon to go over, and how that future content, particularly patch 11.2.5, might actually be hinting at some of the potential release dates for the update. Patch 11.2.5 is one of the major patches that we are aware of, and we know it's releasing on October the 7th. It is mostly a patch with turbo boost, which is going to be a huge catch-up gearing update, but also it's going to have content like Legion Remix, which is one of the biggest things that we could really take a look at in terms of some of the different dates that they have for its phases. For some reason, they decided to release Legion Remix in phases, and this is something that they I don't really know if they should do that in the future. A lot of players generally don't like time gating, but for some reason they decided that they got a lot of good feedback regarding classic content and how that stuff was phased little by little, and they're looking to phase Legion in order to, I guess, try to extend the enjoyment of it. But we'll see how that's gonna go down. Though we do know there are some dates, specific dates for the phases of Legion Remix that help us take some guesses as to when future updates will be arriving. October 7th will be the launch, but future phases will be dropping on October 21st, November 4th, November 18th, and December 9th. And Legion Remix as a feature, which is so fun on PTR, is going to feature many different vendors on a little time warp to bronze-ish, or rather infinite Dragonflight Island, full of different vendors for you to walk up to, and you can purchase all the different gear and items and transmogs and mounts and toys and pets and all variety of collectibles from the expansion of Legion, and specifically for Legion Remix in particular. But there's also one little vendor that they released for a little bit, and then they kind of pulled him back a bit. They kind of erased some of his tagline. There was a housing vendor for a short time in Legion Remix, and then as soon as players found it, they immediately removed the housing vendor tag. But we know that this was initially a housing vendor at some point when they added him out of the blue on PTR. So it looks like possibly either this is Blizzard on purpose adding this vendor for players to notice and then removes the tag just because they're cheeky, or they've accidentally put him in, realized their mistake, realized the players found it, and then they removed it. But it looks like potentially Legion Remix will be around when the housing update will be dropping. And housing updates is likely to be part of the patch, either pre-patch for Midnight or part of the patch 11.2.7 feature. If Legion Remix, which has a very specific end date, is to be ending, but it's likely going to be running at some point with the housing feature already made available. So likely the housing preview is going to be available during the patch 11.2.7, and likely patch 11.2.7 will likely overlap with Legion Remix at least for a brief bit of time. So we will likely be seeing that content update arriving at some point shortly after the final patch, or rather the final phase of Legion Remix. And right now, the most common guess online by the community is likely that they're going to be maybe waiting a week, maybe at most two, after the final phase of Legion Remix, but likely the next date when patch 11.27 will be dropping, so it overlaps a little bit with Legion Remix. Probably going to be December the 16th. This is what the common guess is in the community right now as to when this content update may be dropping. And patch 11.27, while we don't really have a lot of info as to what this update is going to be, housing early access will likely be the biggest draw for this one in particular. Updated Exile's Reach experience potentially could be part of this update as well, as it is one of the major features of Midnight also. Maybe they'll add some kind of like a War Within recap, because it'll be kind of good to add some sort of storylines to recap the story before Midnight, and likely they'll have more story and quests linking War Within to the beginning of Midnight. Maybe something having to do with Blood Elves and the Sunwell, which could be really, really fun. But it's also very possible that 11.27 will be a very light update, and it's likely that maybe Midnight Alpha will be running simultaneously with 11.27. Whether it is going to be at the same time dropping as 11.27 launches or earlier is still up in the air right now. Mostly because Midnight Alpha is kind of in its own category of guessing game when it comes to its release date. First of all, one of the things we can note is Midnight as an expansion began its production around the same time as War Within. And in fact, they were looking to work on multiple different expansions as part of the World Soul Saga, to some degree working on them simultaneously, adjusting storylines, which apparently they've already done for War Within, and then potentially pushing certain storylines later to be experienced at Midnight, or rather, even maybe in The Last Titan, which is the final chapter of the saga. So they're making some adjustments already. But one of the things we know is the 3 expansions are being worked on at the same time, either in full capacity, like in War Within, with all the seasonal updates and content releases, or like pre-production for The Last Titan and a little bit of work there. So it is very, very possible, since they're not working on just one expansion or the next expansion, since they're working on all 3, which are supposed to be like a cohesive storylines that are linked together, it's very possible that Midnight might actually be a little bit more ready than some of the other expansions they've had in the past. What's also interesting to note is if we follow any of their previous expansions trends, War Within as an expansion was released in August of 2024, and the War Within Alpha came out in April of 2024. So the alpha for the War Within expansion came out about 4 months before the official release. But we do have a trend of War Within and their alpha, which was about a 4-month gap between the actual release and the early preview. And while we don't have an official release date for Midnight, it is possible that we may be able to observe a similar trend from previous expansions in order to make a guess as to when we might be getting Alpha to Midnight and potentially getting a release for Midnight. Literally take a look at some of the previous expansions from Shadowlands, Dragonflight, and War Within. It looks like a lot of their announced before dates where they initially reveal the expansion, and then they have like the final end date before they actually have to release it legally. They usually have set it to December of a year of 2020, 2022, or 2024. But the actual release dates were much earlier. Shadowlands and Dragonflight both released in November. In fact, Shadowlands apparently was ready in October, but they actually pushed it back to November in order to make a lot of changes to the Maw, the kind of the inhospitable, difficult, limited area zone for us to explore. And we also took a look at War Within, that was released in August of 26. Midnight is atypical in this regard because the announced before date for them is June 30th instead of December. But looking at the dates so far, it is still possible, and not impossible rather, the Midnight launch could be in the early part of 2026. Like, not completely, summer, but a lot earlier than that. One of the reasons I say this is because War Within as an expansion have had very steady patch cycles so far, from the Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. Unlike previous expansions, none of these patch cycles and content updates have overstayed their welcome. And they're also not going to be doing a proper season, or I guess a holdover Season 4, because we haven't really had a proper Season 4 since Battle for Azeroth, I don't think. But they're not going to be doing a holdover season. They're just going to have 3 solid seasons: Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. And the steadiness of these content updates has been pretty consistent. So likely they're going to keep that consistency for Season 3 as well. And if they continue that steady progress, so then Season 3 would end around February of 2026. And with no holdover season, and with Legion Remix arriving so soon, serving as like a little break and something else to do before, if you're not really into seasonal content, before the Midnight expansion, as like a big catch-up update to get the characters caught up and level a bunch of characters ahead of Midnight, then likely they're going to be pushing on forward without too much of delay. So February may actually be the month we could be getting Midnight. Though no guarantees whatsoever, maybe Season 3 will end up being an extended update, but if they keep going steady as they are, it would line up with the end of Season 3 officially. And if February is the potential release date of Midnight, then the alpha of Midnight, if it follows anything like War Within, maybe it will be available about 4 months before the expansion officially launches. If February, and this is a lot of ifs here, ends up being the release date, that means Alpha should be starting in October, around the same time as Legion Remix and Patch 11.2.5 officially launches. And this is just extrapolating and trying to make a guess, as this is really just a guess as to when this release date will be, but if it's as consistent as what we've had in War Within, without any delays, that's about more or less a ballpark as to when these updates potentially could be launching. However, there's also another possibility, and this is just me going off the top of my head. I think the month of November could also make for an excellent time to release some kind of a major update like the alpha. Mostly because November marks WoW's anniversary. During the anniversary for WoW, there's usually some sort of a big event, and last time they did a huge event that lasted for like a month in Teneris, where players could earn a bunch of different rewards. There's all these different world bosses for you to slay, a bunch of currency for you to collect, so many different items for you to unlock, and there's so many ways for players to participate, even for those that don't have or never purchased the War Within as an expansion. So November generally is a huge draw for players that haven't played the game for a while to return for some of those unique rewards that are basically given out to players as a thank you for being part of the game and the community. And that could potentially be another opportunity for them to maybe drop the Midnight Alpha as everybody is coming back to the game, enjoying some of the free goodies that are available during the anniversary, and the content that's available during that time will likely be getting inundated with a ton of content of Midnight Alpha, which could potentially get more players to want to pre-order Midnight Alpha for the upcoming housing preview, as maybe they'll want to get in on that housing system a lot earlier as they're watching players build their homes in the alpha. So that potentially could be the best time for them to also drop it as well, just as it will be the best maelstrom of events and festivities and celebrations all at once. To drop even more content on Midnight Alpha would also make sense in November. But with this, I do want to kind of pass it on to you guys in the comment section. In particular, when do you think we'll be getting any future updates? When do you think we'll be getting things like housing early preview and potentially even the patch 11.2.7, which is likely to be the update for housing specifically? But also, when do you think we'll be getting Midnight Alpha and the Midnight release? If you just had to take a guess off the top of your head, what dates do you think are the most realistic in your mind? And what do you think is the possibility of them potentially releasing Midnight early, since they are doing the whole World Soul Saga and are working on multiple expansions at the same time? Do you think that'll potentially be a factor in them possibly releasing some playable content early to the players, or do you think they should and likely will take their time with it either way, and we are going to have a considerable wait until the next chapter is finally playable? I'd really like to hear those thoughts in the comments down below. But with that, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it, found it informative and or interesting, go ahead and give this video a like, as it would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, because we'll be posting a lot of content over there as well as soon as we have some actual releases, announcements, or anything playable regarding Midnight Alpha and future content updates. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.